To get started. Hey, it is time for us to begin. Okay. So I handed out a few cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards, I think. Mostly the people over here. I wasn't paying close attention. So, while we're talking about some other things, you are temporarily excused if you have a card to not pay quite as close of attention. Open that to the scripture that you have on your card. Quickly read through. I think you'll be somewhat familiar with what's going on, okay? And I want you to be able to summarize what's going on real quick. This is the trial of Jesus or something, whatever. He's telling a parable about this. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. Okay, that's all, okay? And a question will be asked or something will be said about the hearts of the people, okay, who are approaching Jesus, okay? Why they asked the question or how they were dealing with him. That's what I'm shopping for, okay? I want you to look at that verse. And I want you to say, they were doing this when, whatever, they were testing him or whatever, when they asked their question. What's the question or what are they doing? And it'll tell you their heart, okay, why they were doing it, okay? So quickly look over that. It shouldn't take you a few minutes while we do some other things here, okay? This lesson is not really a review of what we talked about on Sunday. We're going to move rather quickly because our class is ending soon. But the goal of this lesson, and also on Sunday we'll talk a little bit more about this, is to not fear Bible questions that people may ask you, okay? And to be prepared in your mind about what you'll do if and when people ask you those questions, okay? By the way, those of you who are looking up your verses for me, you've got plenty of time because it's going to come at the end of class, okay? So you don't panic, okay? So, and also we're going to talk a little bit about thinking carefully about the question before we answer. Like James. James said, in fact, I meant to include that, we're to be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Okay? So really, really listen. And we'll talk more about this on Sunday. Listen to understand, not just listen to answer. I have to fight this all the time. I'm studying with a Jehovah's Witness. I'm not. But if I'm studying with Jehovah's Witness, I already know what argument they're going to make. I already know what he's going to say because I've talked to many of them. I've read many of their materials. And I have to discipline myself to listen. The guy is saying the same thing, and I'm like, yeah, I know what I'm going to say. That's not good, okay? That's not going to produce a good answer either. So we need to listen to the question, really listen. And sometimes there's something behind the question, and we're going to talk about that today more than we're going to talk about answering the question, okay? Because sometimes there's something behind. Jesus, we're going to see, is the perfect one to be able to see what's behind the question because he knows what people are thinking. He knows the hearts of the people. Well, he knows what's going on. Oh, Jacob's class is not meeting because he's sick. Did everybody know that downstairs? We need to make sure that Cody Cody can check. Cody, just make sure that Jacob's sick today. So he said make sure no one goes to his class. I see James is here, so I forgot to do that. So, but anyway. So that's the thing. So Jesus, we're going to see with the woman at the well. Okay, let's review that just real quick from Sunday. Okay, just in general, did you learn anything from Jesus' encounter about talking to people about the gospel? Did you learn anything about when we went through the woman at the well in John chapter 4? What did you learn? What were you reminded of, or what did you notice? Anything? James.
Doesn't specifically mention why she had so many husbands. It wasn't necessarily mentioned in a good manner, I guess, but interesting how much influence she had over people
Yeah.
in that state.
Right. Maybe she'd been married to half the village anyway, but anyway. But you're right. You're right. Sometimes you may think either that you don't have very much influence, or the person that you are talking to may not have very much influence. This one woman somehow wielded all this influence over the village. Very interesting, okay? And you're talking to somebody, and you find out they're involved in a lot of sin, and a lot of times they're like, oh boy, you know. But this woman, instead of Jesus abandoning her, winds up reaching out to a whole village because of her. I mean, like you wouldn't expect. What else, Robin?
He took something physical to something natural.
Yeah, that was the whole point. Jesus took a well-known well, dug by Jacob and their ancestor, talk about water, and somehow or other had developed that into something more. The same thing, by the way, you can do the same thing, buying a bottle of water, and somebody's talking. Can you believe people buy a bottle of water today, you know? And I was thinking, yeah, I've been thinking about water. In fact, in our Bible class on Sunday, Jesus was talking to a woman about water, and there you go, and there's your door. And you know, if we're creative, if we're thinking, we can talk about the weather. We can talk about. Jesus talks about the weather. One time he says, you know, you can say. It's red at night, and what is it, Sailor's Delight or something? It's red in the morning, and Jesus kind of relates to, you can tell by the color of the sky that it's going to rain, but you can't tell, he says, you can't tell the age that you're living in, that the Messiah was standing right in front of him. We can take the weather and go from there. Sometimes we have to manipulate it a little bit from the sermon, a Bible class, something that you've been reading in the Bible. And so sometimes it's not going to be quite as direct, but you can do that if you'll think about it. You know? Keely.
Social barriers might not be as much of a barrier as we expect.
Ah.
Or work out that way.
Excellent. And sometimes that's the way we are with social barriers. And I don't just mean race or skin color or language. I don't mean that. There are things that sometimes they're awkward for us to talk to people about, and we can crash through those to show people that there's something more important. Jesus did that. Excellent point. Other things from the Samaritan woman? And by the way, when Jesus' disciples came back, we didn't spend much time on this, but they're like, what's he doing? You know, what's going on over there? They didn't get it either. And so sometimes you will do some things, you'll try to do some things, and even your brothers and sisters will kind of roll their eyes or maybe not compliment you or not want to go in and do it with you or something. You do it anyway because that's not who you're doing it for. They should learn a lesson, and Jesus tried to teach his disciples to not be like that. And so we do need to learn some of those lessons. But don't let that stop you, okay? Just because other people aren't doing it, other people weren't talking to Samaritans, so, no, that didn't stop Jesus. Okay? Break through those cultural, social barriers. Very good. But the Samaritan woman, one aspect that we did spend some time on, reminds us that people are likely to ask questions once spiritual things are introduced. Anybody remember the question she asked? Oh, I perceive that you're a prophet. And when he mentions this thing about her having been married and now she's living with somebody who's not her husband, anybody remember the question that she asked? Did she ask a marriage question? Yeah, she didn't ask a marriage question. And that's a lot of times what people are going to do. They're going to ask a question that doesn't have much to do with themselves. Going to take the pressure off themselves, going to take the spotlight off themselves, and put it back on somebody else. Probably back on you, on the hot seat, to answer a question, okay? So that we can talk about something else. Or something, in their time, controversial. Almost all the questions that we're going to talk about here in a minute are controversial, okay? And so, what do you think about the athletes kneeling when they make a touchdown, or hit a home run and they kiss their hand and point up to the God? What do you think about that? You haven't thought about that, and so how do you feel? Because now you're the one, okay, that has to answer. What do you think about these people that knock on your door? What do you think about the people that, in politics, that use God as a way to get votes? And maybe they'll quote somebody who, or what do you think about that picture where he's standing there holding a Bible, And what about these hypocrites in the church? Or I heard about this guy that abused, and then the story goes on, and we're going, my grandfather, when he went to Nigeria the first time, so this would have been in the 1950s, and sometimes he was the first non-African to come to some of these areas and preach the gospel. And when he was there, here's what they said. They said, if this is so important, then what took you so long to get here? And my grandfather said he wanted to crawl away. There's a lot of times there aren't some good answers, okay? But that doesn't change the message, that the message is true. And sometimes our failings, don't reflect well. We've talked about that in the past. But I'm here now, okay? You want to hear now? Okay? So sometimes you just have to kind of push past it. So, do you remember 1 Peter 3 and verse 15? What's that say? Somebody turn and read 1 Peter 3:15. Yeah.
But sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account of the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and earnestness.
Right. So what does 1 Peter 3? We've talked about this on multiple occasions. What does 1 Peter 3:15 say that we need to be ready to do? I did learn something in the gospel meeting from Tommy. He drank lots of water when he was here. For some reason, I'm very dry today. So, what does 1 Peter 3:15 say we need to be ready to do? Yeah, give a defense. Some translations say give an answer to everyone who asks you. Everyone who asks you. For what? Yeah, the reason for your hope, okay? Does not say, and I've said this multiple times, does not say that you have to be able to give an answer to every question, okay? Anybody who's taught children knows that they can ask Bible questions that are really tough to answer. Sometimes it's tough to bring it down to their level, but sometimes it's just tough. Krista one time asked, is there a floor in heaven? Okay? Oh, I don't know. What do we do with that one? So I'm just saying that sometimes there will be some questions really tough to answer. And we've talked about this before also, sometimes people will not be fully prepared for the answer that you do have, okay? So sometimes we have to back up. Who was telling me, somebody was telling me recently that somebody asked them if all dogs go to heaven, okay? Obviously, there's a show, a movie, but and the person's dog had just recently died, okay? And they were really broke up about it. And this person was not a Christian. And you know what the guy said? Let's study it. Let's study it. Which was a great answer, and you're all wondering. I know what you're wondering, okay? And he said after like 3 or 4 weeks, studying each week, they had not gotten around intentionally, by his thing, to whether dogs go to heaven or not. Because there's something much more fundamental, and that's, do all people go to heaven? And of course the answer is no on that. And he said that the guy, I think, was eventually baptized, and they never got around to talking about dogs, okay? Some people won't let you do that, okay? Some people won't let you do that. But again, instead of just saying whatever your opinion might be, or the Bible doesn't say anything about that or whatever, and just see you later, well, why don't we study that? Why don't we look for that? We start with Jesus and what Jesus came to do. And what direction does that take us, okay? It kind of takes us away from the physical world, even the animal world. Although I think it touches the animal world and how we respond, but then I think that can be powerful. Instead of just answering with a yes or a no. I'm very reluctant to answer questions yes or no. Sometimes people force me, but I really want to study it. Because if I just answer no or yes, then they're listening to me and they're responding to me. And they can discount me. For good reason, they can discount. I'm sometimes wrong. I don't know everything. I'm not God. But they can't discount Jesus. They can't discount the Scriptures. That's why I beg people. Maybe it sounds like I'm hedging or fudging a little bit to say, I don't want to tell you the answers right now. Then it's just my word. But we've got to get them to study. And even if you don't want to study it with them, then we'll go back to the lesson a couple weeks ago where we invite them to study with somebody else. Whether it's here or whether it's one-on-one, I don't know the answer to that. But I know some people that can direct you to some scriptures. And so we wind up taking an answer and helping them find the answer, either ourselves or helping them find somebody that can help them find the answer. We do want to help people by showing us answers when we can. So this isn't just a complete cop-out to say, don't worry about it, don't study things, okay? So let's just take a couple minutes. What ways have helped you prepare to answer questions? I can tell you what's helped me, but what has helped you? Even if they're not super complicated questions, but what things have helped you prepare yourself to answer questions? That's a question. Bill?
Say regularly study with fellow Christians about controversial topics.
Yeah,
Say comfortable talking about
yeah, challenging yourself to study more difficult topics, not avoiding them. Asking sometimes to study, asking for sermons, asking for Bible classes on topics that may not pertain directly to you. Okay? Study with other Christians and say, hey, or read from other Christians who maybe even have ideas that you haven't thought about. It can be healthy, challenging. Doesn't mean they might be wrong, but it challenges your thinking. It also sharpens you a little bit in thinking when people say stuff and you're thinking it through. And then maybe responding, you're answering. What else? Bill?
Well, I think you're going to lead us through an exercise of doing this, but there may be a similar question that's asked in the Bible. But you
Right.
can see how that's answered.
Okay.
Or maybe the question is different, but we can see the method used. So, like question about divorce, and Jesus responds by going all the way back to Genesis
Right.
chapter 3 or Genesis chapter 2. Maybe we would have thought, oh no, I'm going to look up a bunch of marriage verses in the New Testament that talk about marriage, but you see where Jesus is establishing authority perhaps, or original intention. And so those might be some ways that will help us answer questions.
Yeah, very good. There's a bunch of questions what Jesus is dealing with. How did he deal with them? But I think so you may find Jesus dealing with exactly the question that you're being asked, but more importantly, I think Bill's right that how did he deal with it? So he went back to the beginning, God's original intention. Maybe we need to do that on these gender issues too. Maybe we need to do this on role of women too. Maybe we need to go, you see what I'm saying? And so we can apply some of those same research principles in answering some of these things too. Cody.
Yeah, I found when I'm personally more studying the Bible more in different time in my life, for whatever reason, like just having scripture that's top of the mind comes up way more than
Right.
I would think otherwise.
Right.
Topic comes up or a question comes up, and maybe the scriptures that I'm saying that they aren't exactly about that, but like there's a lot of wisdom and there are a lot of answers in the Bible, and so if you're like dedicated to being in the Word intentionally yourself, having that wisdom more top of mind makes you more confident.
Yeah, right.
Because if you don't, if you're not reading the Bible at all, and someone asks you a question, like you're like, wow, where do I go? It's so big. There's some maybe there's this scripture talks about this, but if you're like intentionally reading it, like section of scripture or a specific Bible study, maybe the question itself isn't exactly covering what you're reading, but like there's still a lot of related things that you're going to be looking no matter where you're studying the Bible.
So, and then again, the more you study, the more confident you're going to be. That's what Cody's saying. But here's, I think, a really important thing. That study the text of the Bible, not just books about the text of the Bible. So sometimes people call Bible study, and when you look at what they're doing, they're reading books about the Bible. And they're not going to the primary source. Books about the Bible are not bad, okay? But I'm just going to tell you, if you understand the book of Philippians, okay, and you have a good grasp of the book of Philippians, and somebody asks you a question from the book of Philippians, you feel pretty good about it. You're not going to be super intimidated. Or they ask you some question about Jesus coming to earth, and what's up with what happened to him? You're going to think, oh, I know Philippians 2 talks about that. Because and you can walk through Philippians chapter 2. So the more comfortable you are with the text, the more comfortable you're going to be with topics. So sometimes we feel like we have to study every topic when really we have to study every text. And the topics will kind of find their own way. But we're going to have to move on a little bit. But let me just mention one more thing, and that's be turning over to John 18. But number 3, when you don't know the answer, it's not bad. In fact, I think it's somewhat endearing to people to say, I don't know the answer to that. So let's find it. Don't leave it there, okay? Don't leave it there. So let's find it together. That's a good question. I have that question too, or I never thought about that. I don't know if I've ever heard people talk about that. I know There must be some verses. Let's find them. You go look, I'll go look, or I'll talk to my people, you talk to your people, whatever it takes. Let's do some research. So it's the worst case scenario is to try to fake it. Why is that bad, to try and fake it? Yeah, you're not being transparent. What's the other problem? You could be wrong. You know, you could be wrong, okay? And not only does that look bad when you have to admit that, but it's wrong, and you're misleading people, okay? So again, being transparent, we're truth seekers. That's what a disciple is, a learner. I'm learning. I'm still learning. Everybody's still learning. I remember a gospel preacher in his 80s called my friend Rick, who was, I think at the time, probably maybe 30, and said, I heard you preach this sermon the other day. And he went, uh-oh, you know. He said, what was that verse that you quoted? And he gave it to him, and he said, oh, I just couldn't remember. You made a good point. He hung up. And so he's like, you know. So we get intimidated by that, but here's this 80-year-old preacher who was still learning. Okay, and it's powerful. Justin, what were you going to say?
Same lines, that vulnerability goes really, really long way. Showing that you're vulnerable, showing you don't know everything. Endearing, but I'd also say disarming.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good word. That's a better word, in fact. Disarming. The title of this lesson, Are You Asking for Yourself?, is actually taken from John chapter 18. Thinking about the motivation of the people who are asking questions. I started off the lesson talking about that because not everybody's motivation is going to be pure. And Jesus could ascertain that because he's the Son of God. He knew the hearts of men. He knew what people were doing. And you can see how he responds, if he responds at all. Because there are some cases where he doesn't respond at all. Because he knows the hearts, he knows what's going on. Some of that is what was going on in his trial. And in John chapter 18, he's in Pilate's court, and all these accusations are flying around. We're not going to go through all of that. But when Pilate enters, verse 33, the praetorium, okay, that's part of his palace and judgment seats there. He says to Jesus, are you the king of the Jews? Okay, there's a question. And Jesus responds, are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me? So there's two things happening here, and we can't feel it in English. There's the word are you the king of the Jews, is not in the original text. It's implied. So literally, Pilate said, you are the king of the Jews. But there's voice inflection, okay? So you can feel it in English. You are the king of the Jews is not the same as you're the king of the Jews, okay? So when Jesus is playing with that a little bit, when he says, are you speaking for yourself? Are you saying this? Are you really saying this? Or are you are you asking for you? Are you saying this for you? Have you learned this, or are you asking for somebody else? We're not going to pursue this tonight, but Jesus plays with this several times throughout not only his trial, but also through, his work on earth, where people come and ask him a question, or they say something to him, and he's checking their motivation. And that can be powerful for us. That can be helpful for us. And it can, I think, affect how we answer. And should affect how we answer. I told you we've studied with a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, and especially when I first started preaching, we had an ad in the paper, and they were answering the ad in the paper and coming a lot. We studied with a couple for a long time, which was rare, but it was very good for me. Like Cody said, it forced me to keep these things in the front of my mind and to think about some things that maybe I had never thought about before. I was a very young preacher, and I was 21 years old, and so we were hadn't studied with them before, and they were asking hard questions from the Book of Revelation and stuff. So it was good for me to understand the text. They left eventually in exasperation, and but our doorbell rang some months later, and here was one of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and he had a young man with him, and they were going door to door, and he was obviously an older man mentoring a younger man. And of course, this guy knew me, older man. The young man didn't. He introduced me to him, and he says, "Now, David," and he asked me a question that he had asked me many times before, because he wanted the young man to see how crazy I am, or how off base I am, or wanted to be able to mentor him and ask and responding to that question. I mean, I knew it. And so, obviously, my response to this was not positive. I mean, I wouldn't get angry or anything like that, but I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to play that game with him. So there are some occasions where we can sense that we just need to stop. Jesus talks about shaking the dust off our feet and going on. And there are going to be a few of those where people are wasting our time. We're not going to talk a lot about those cases because we're going to assume that those are not most of the cases. Jesus does not spend a lot of time trying to convince Herod. In fact, he doesn't say anything when he's on trial with Herod. And he hardly says anything at all to Pilate. Almost nothing at all to the Jewish leaders. So, because he knew that it wouldn't do any good. So this can be very difficult. I'm not saying I'm really good at this, because I'm not. I tend to be very optimistic about people. I find it very difficult to stop and to say we're just wasting our time. But it does happen. So real quick, we only have a few minutes left. So who has Matthew chapter 19, 3 through 9? Who'd I give that to? Matthew 19. Philip, tell us what's happening, and tell us the motivation of the question.
Yeah, what, tell you or read?
Don't read it. We can all read it, but just summarize it. Summarize what's happening, and then you can read the motivation if you want to read that verse. But
The Jews asked Jesus whether it was lawful to divorce their wife for any reason.
right,
And he said no.
right,
He said from the beginning God never said like that. They said, well, then why did Moses let it do it?
right,
And Jesus said, because of the hardness of your hearts. But
Right.
it would never be like that from the beginning.
right. Well, but the text tells you the motivation of why they asked the question. Why did they ask that question?
They were testing Jesus.
That's right. So they were testing. One of the more famous marriage divorce verses in the Bible was born out of a question that was not sincerely asked. They didn't want to know the answer. Okay, they got the answer, but they didn't want to know. They were testing him. Okay, and the word, and sometimes the word test is actually the word tempt. They were tempting him. Some older translations, they came tempting him. They're hoping he makes a mistake. And obviously he doesn't. Who has Matthew 22, 15 through 22? Okay, James? Real quick overview of that. What's happening?
So this is where Jesus is being asked by the disciples of the Pharisees whether they should be paying taxes.
Aha, right.
And, of course, Jesus kind of puts them in their place a little bit, saying, show me a point. He didn't pull anything out of his own pockets. He said,
Mhm.
pull that out of your pocket. There's no trickery here. Whose face is on that? And then tells them to render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's.
Yeah, did you see a verse that shows the motivation?
It says they plotted how to entangle him in his word.
Uh-huh. Yeah, entangle him. So sometimes the motivation for a question is to try to stump the preacher, or to stump you, or to show you your own weaknesses or something like that. Okay? And sometimes questions aren't good motivation. Who has Matthew 22:34 through 40? Cody.
So, a Pharisee lawyer comes and asks Jesus, what's the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus answers, the greatest is to love the Lord your God by your heart, and then you also get a second commandment, and that's to love thy neighbor. And it says motivation. The lawyer asks him the question,
To what?
to test him.
Yeah, to test him. And then the second question he asks, who is my neighbor? You see that? And that gives rise to the question, to the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? Am I thinking of the right one?
I think that one.
That was the Luke verse. Who has Luke 10? Oh, okay. Go ahead, James. Did I steal your thunder there?
No.
Okay.
Ron.
Ron, we have Ron James and we have a James Bryant, and so I keep calling him James. I apologize. Brother James. I just got to go Brother James. All right.
So my answer is similar to Cody. So there's a Pharisee that approached Jesus, and
Right.
he basically said that he was testing him. So,
Right.
Jesus, which he did often, the Pharisee asked him a question, what should I do to inherit eternal life? So Jesus answers his question by asking him a question
Uh-huh.
to make him give him the answer.
Right.
And the answer that he gave him was twofold. He talked about, in Deuteronomy, the responsibility to God and the responsibility to man,
Right.
and shut him down, basically, right? And then the rest of the story is, and he said you answered right, and so on and so forth. But that's sort of summary of it.
Very good. That's right. And then, why did he ask, who is my neighbor? Did you see it in?
He wasn't justify himself.
Right.
the Bible says.
Right. So here's we got testing, and then we got justifying yourself. So, you ask a question, and then the answer comes up, and so you feel kind of dumb. And so then you ask what you think is a self-justifying or a harder question or something like that. Okay? And so sometimes they're not great. Robin?
People a lot of times ask a question, and when you answer, they want to throw it back on you.
Right.
So they say something really hard or something controversial.
Right. Right. Who has John chapter 8? Who do I go to? Okay, Carrie?
The scribes and Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery before Jesus and asked if she should be stoned.
Right.
And it says they asked this to trap him in order that they might have evidence to accuse him.
Yeah. So here's a trapping question. And we don't always feel it because of our culture or because we're not living there at the time. Divorce questions, extremely controversial. They're trying to pigeonhole Jesus, where he took the side of the Pharisees, or we're going to ask a resurrection question, and he took the sides of the Sadducees, or we've got we've got this question. He's taking the side of Caesar, and we can accuse him, or he says don't pay tax, and we can say that's treason, and so they're trying to trap him in these things. We don't always feel it when we're reading the text, but it was some of these questions. Do we worship on this mountain? We worship it was 100-year-old questions here that they argued and fought about, and there were problems about it. And so again, trying to trap people, trying to entangle them in popular political, cultural problems. Same thing can happen with us. Well, who are you going to vote for? Who are you going to vote for? Here's this person supports, abortion or something like that. This person over here, is against immigrants or something like that. And how do we take a position? And I think Jesus withdrew from all of that and didn't take political positions. We need to find a way to direct it to spiritual things. things that are biblical. One more, Luke 11:52. How do you get that? Oh yeah, that's right, Emily.
Some Pharisees and lawyers come to Jesus and ask him to eat with them, and they're upset when he doesn't wash up before dinner first. And he tells them they make the outside of themselves clean, but the inside is not good and wicked.
Right.
He just points out their hypocrisy.
Okay. Right. And so here is this, and so sometimes they would come and they were in verse 53. What's their response? You still have your Bible open? Just read verse 53 for us.
And he said these things to them, the scribes and Pharisees began to assail him vehemently and to cross-examine him about many things.
Right. So sometimes you'll be saying things and it won't even be, I don't know, that negative or that controversial, and people will attack you with questions, attack you with charges, attack you with, all Christians are hypocrites, and all churches are whatever, this or that, and and that can happen. Okay, so it's a warning that not all questions are honest questions. Okay, we'll talk more about answering, and we'll move on a little bit to more what we should say in a positive sense, Lord willing, on Sunday.
And after you have that song marked, you can turn to number 29. Number 29, The Rock of My Heart. This is one of Savannah's favorite hymns, mine too, I guess, and so I figured I'd lead it tonight as she's not as comfortable as she normally is, so hopefully this will make you feel a little better. Number 29, The Rock of My Heart. My Lord, I need nothing beside you. Without you, I could not have stood. Your promise is my hope and my refuge. Your nearness, my strength and my good. My heart may be broken within me, my earthly strength may depart, but you are my portion forever. You are the rock of my heart. You are the rock of my heart. When I was distressed and embittered by things I could not understand, your presence was continually with me. You always took hold of my hand. My heart may be broken within me, my earthly strength may depart, but you are my portion forever. You are the rock of my heart. You are the rock of my heart. I know that your counsel will guide me in wisdom, devotion, and love. And afterward you'll call me to glory, to dwell in your presence above. My heart may be broken within me, my earthly strength may depart, but you are my portion forever. You are the rock of my heart. You are the rock of my heart.
I saw a guy doing some preaching on a campus, saw a video, and he takes questions. And the question that he was asked, very interesting, a lot of them are very hard-hitting, challenging questions. And the question was, did Judas go to hell? Did Judas go to hell? These kind of questions, put us on the hot seat. And people sometimes want to hear that kind of judgment from us. These words where we are saying, God sent him to hell. And yet, the answer was a good answer. I'll share with you, and I'll say some of my own words, but this isn't all original with me. Did Judas go to hell because he betrayed Jesus? So here's an interesting thing. Yes, Judas betrayed Jesus. But Peter betrayed Jesus. Judas was plotting, and he arranged for to get 30 pieces of silver to turn Jesus in. But Peter denied rather furiously, vehemently, with curses and oaths that he even knew Jesus 3 times. What's the difference? What's the difference? Sometimes we may wonder if we're a Judas or if we're a Peter. If we're some of our denials. We have some opportunities sometimes to confess Christ and we don't. Or to act differently from the world and we don't. And sometimes we wonder, oh, maybe I'm a Judas. Or we sin, and we sin again, and we sin again, and we sin again. Oh, that's 3. 3 denials. That sound familiar? That's what Peter did. Both of them were overcome by guilt. We feel that too sometimes with our sin. Both of them overcome with guilt. What's the difference? Well, Judas fell into despair. Judas regretted what he did, but what did he do with that regret? Did he genuinely repent? Did he then try to come back to Jesus? No, he went out and hanged himself. The focus was on himself, and he never took the focus off of himself and put it on Jesus. Peter, if you remember, when he denied Jesus and the rooster crowed, somehow or other Jesus turned and looked at him, and that's when Peter went out and wept bitterly, it says. Again, great regret, deep feelings of guilt. If you listen to the verse that Aaron read just a few minutes ago in Luke 22, it's where Jesus basically says to Simon, you're going to fall away tonight. He comes right out and says, you're going to deny me 3 times. Peter's like, no way, even if I have to die with you. He says, I've prayed for you that your faith should not fail. What was going to be the test as to whether or not Peter's faith would fail or not? What was the test? Not the denial. Not the denial. We already know he's going to do that. Jesus already knows he's going to do that. So Jesus says, I prayed for you that your faith won't fail. He's not praying that Peter won't deny him. He already knows he's going to do that. So what's he praying for? And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brother. What's he praying for? The return. That's what he's praying for. That's the difference between Judas and Peter. It's not in the denial. It's not in the failure. It's not in the guilt. It's in the return. The question as to whether we're going to be a Judas or a Peter is not in whether or not we will deny Jesus. I'm not advocating that. We need to try not to do that, but we are going to fail. And what are we going to do with that failure? Are we going to go out in our despair? We're going to just try to, rationalize it and hide it and, and just try to just go on bearing it and carrying it ourselves? Where does that lead? Paul wrote to the Corinthians and told them that the sorrow of this world leads to death. Where you just are sorry about stuff and you just carry it and bear it and, It's awful. But godly sorrow leads to repentance that leads to life, he said. That's what Peter had. He's describing Peter and Judas. And he's saying, which is it going to be for you? I'm not a person that thinks that guilt is a bad thing. If we let it push us to Jesus, to return to Jesus. It's only a bad thing if we just, it just eats at us. Then it'll be terrible. But the greatest thing is that we don't have to do that. We can come to Jesus and we can just throw it at his feet. And he won't reject us. He's saying, come unto me, all you who are weak and heavy laden. The ones who have this horrible burden, this terrible stuff that we're carrying, and I will give you rest. What is he? He's not talking about resting after a long day's journey. He's not talking about resting after working all day. He's not talking about that kind of thing. He's talking about the spiritual rest where our guilt can be taken away. No matter what it is. Even if we've denied Jesus to his face 3 times and thought he was done with us. We thought we were done with him. And he says, and when you return to me, I'm going to use you to strengthen your brother. I'm going to use you to spread the gospel. I'm going to use you. So that's the invitation tonight. Don't be a Judas, don't despair. Be a Peter, not perfect, but somebody who returns to Jesus every single time. No matter what we've done. And if we can help you in any way to deal with that, and to be forgiven in Christ. If you're not a Christian, you return by repenting of those sins and confessing them and being immersed in water. And Jesus will take you. I don't care how long, how old you are, young, old, how long you've been doing it. If you've done one bad thing or a million, uncountable, don't despair. It's not going to be healthy for you. It's not going to give you a happy life. But you can return to him. And he'll use you to serve him and others. If we can help you come back to Christ, tell us while we stand and sing this song.
For the throne of God above, I have a strong, a perfect plea, a great high priest whose name is love, whoever lives and pleads for me. My name is graven on his hands, my name is written on his heart. I know that while in heaven he stands, no tongue can bid me thence depart. No tongue can bid me thence depart. Behold him there, the risen Lamb, my perfect, spotless righteousness, the great unchangeable I am, the King of glory and of grace. Now one with him I cannot die. My soul is purchased by his blood. My life is hid with Christ on high. With Christ my Savior and my God. With Christ my Savior and my God.
I don't have a lot of new announcements. I just can report that all the Sinks are back home safely from traveling, so that's good. We have a few that are out with colds. Jake and Beckett are sick. I do want to just especially mention, you heard me pray for him, Trey Harper, that's Mark's dad. he has several health concerns, but most importantly right now, and kind of the biggest concern, is he has severe pneumonia, and he's currently in the hospital dealing with that and not doing very well. So let's be praying for Trey Harper. Are there any other announcements that we need to make? Right, so there is a deacons and elders meeting tomorrow night. So if you're one of those, be mindful of that, but also if there's something that you would like brought up in that meeting, just see one of us. All right, let's be led in prayer.
Let's go to God in word of prayer. Father in heaven, you bless us so much each and every day of our lives. Everything that we have that's good in this world, everything that we have that's good in our lives is a blessing from you. We had the opportunity to experience just a beautiful day outside. And here, towards the end of the day, we've had the opportunity to come together and sing songs of praise to you and try to build each other up. A portion of your word spoken